discovery of beauty for me was the necessity of suffering. And you can see that on a farm. There's no controlling when nature does its thing and your people are suffering, like, or your animals, or your harvest or whatever, then you have to accept that suffering as part of the growth process. And the only thing you have control over is how you respond to it. Hello, that's Stoicism. That precedes Jesus. And and so how do you respond? With a set of virtues that we all agree should be endemic or do undergird a soulfully healthy culture. I'm not saying this the right way, but
I think the you start with something kind of interesting, which is that instead of seeing life as an attempt to avoid suffering at all costs, which is very much a modern perspective, we're going to banish pain, we're going to banish fear, we're going to banish death even. We're going to push everything out of the way so we have this. And what you were saying is that that's not actually how you overcome suffering or how you really deal with suffering. What you do is you start with suffering. And you accept that that is absolutely integral to life. And as you say, the question is simply, how do we respond to this? What meaning do we give to it? And for me, I have to say that, and this is a paradox, of course, that it's in suffering that we actually, and I said this to Anderson Cooper the other day, it's in suffering that we see that we are truly ourselves, because we are most aware that we are not in control, that we have to endure this stuff, and therefore it's what brings us to God. It's what brings us to something beyond. And therefore suffering, rather far from being the thing of all that you must avoid, is the thing you must first accept. And that, of course, is critical to the Christian story, which is that suffering is everything. And it's a bizarre thing, really. It's a bizarre idea, but it does make sense of the world, to me at least, in as much as I see the suffering, for example, that my mother endured almost her entire life, not as something.
If I can ask.
Well, she was bipolar, depressive, and also borderline personality disorder. She had a lot of mental illness, which led to extreme misery. I mean, that's all that can be said: depression and despair and anxiety that just wrecked her life all the time. And
do you have any siblings?
Yes, I do. I have one of each. And
are you the oldest?
I am the middle, actually.
My God, you're a hot mess, man. I mean, you had to respond to a lot of shit being a middle child of a bipolar mother, which my kids think I am, but I'm not. But they have to label everything they don't understand, you know.
Right.
But that she was truly diagnosed and couldn't get help and no meds, no therapy.
Well, she did.
Nothing.
She did. She was hospitalized several times and had to have ECT and all that stuff. So she was, but in the 60s, 70s, and even 80s, the treatments were not really that good yet. They've gotten really good, thank God. But what I'm trying to say is that you could look at that and see nothing of value in it, because there wasn't at many times. You could see the despair she was in, and it used to break my heart. But I do know that she became closer to God through all that. I do know that she relied upon a sense of transcendence to get her through this stuff, and that made her closer to serenity than might otherwise have been the case. Maybe this is not very persuasive to most people, but I don't believe her suffering was in vain. Put it that way. I think her suffering gave her dignity. I
haven't thought about this, but I'm captivated by the concept, and I think why people don't understand it as a process of the living the experience of this life in this thing is because the church, and I really have a big problem with my Catholicism, and I don't understand the language, and I know it's this kind of poetry. My daughter's a poet, and I know the Psalms are poetry, but I find the suffering not the way the doctrine to me describes suffering is like it's a punishment, and it often is a punishment for something you've done wrong, but it also can happen when you've done everything right. So it's not, it's in that on that plane of issues that we can't explain it it feels like there should be no meaning to it. But
yes, the first thing we do as Catholics is kneel down before someone being tortured on a cross, and we regard this as the critical experience that transcended that changed human consciousness forever. The Passion is basically a story of suffering that is redemptive, and that had never really no one ever really seen suffering like that before in that context. Nietzsche, of course, found that absolutely repellent, but nonetheless, that's what the central Christian message is, and it's definitely kind of girds you for living.